By every measure, I was living the dream. So why did I feel like I was dying inside?
Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles.
If you've ever stood in front of your own metaphorical mirror, successful by every external standard, but inside feeling trapped, anxious, or empty, this episode is for you. I'm Gary Miles, and today I'm going to share my deeply personal journey from the terrified lawyer to someone who now helps elite attorneys find the freedom they deserve without sacrificing the success that they work so hard to build. By the end of this session, you will understand why so many successful attorneys feel this way. What's really driving that disconnection? The disconnect between the external success and the internal struggles. And most importantly, you will understand how and why transformation is possible. And when I was a child growing up in a lower middle class neighborhood in Baltimore City, I was a smart kid who didn't fit in. I was heavy, indeed fat. I wore nerdy glasses. I was not particularly athletic. I was not at all cool, I guess, to be candid. I was a nerd or a geek. And I didn't fit in. I was bullied. I was very heavy and made fun of for that. I was called Pugsley and Arnold after the pig on Green Acres. I was made fun of and mocked as a kid. It made me feel different. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt like I was not part of. And I built perfectionism as my protective armor. See, I was incredibly smart. And that made me even more unpopular because everyone else would get a 68 on the test and say how hard it was. And the teacher didn't teach it right. I'd get a 97 and I would blow their whole argument. And that just compounded my feeling separate and different. But my formula was, if I excel at everything, I will finally be worthy. And I actually graduated number one in my high school class, number one in my college class, and number one in law school. But the problem was that armor of perfectionism, of success, eventually became my prison. And this is the key point. Those traits, those very traits that help us create our success, often become the very chains that entrap us. After law school, I clerked in federal court for an amazing judge. It was a plum job. It's quite hard to get a job as a federal clerk. Everyone wants it, and it's very, very difficult to get. And it's quite an honor and a privilege to serve in federal court as a clerk to a trial judge in U.S. District Court. I joined my firm in 1982. I became a partner in 1986 when I was 33 years old. And later in the 80s, I became a managing partner of the firm. I worked with two amazing mentors, Dick Lurch and Joe Huseman. Dick taught me humility and courtesy and the real power of connection, and Joe Huseman taught me courage and fortitude and resilience. I practiced mostly in the area of transportation law. What that means is when a truck driver would get in an accident on the interstate and hit somebody, I was retained to represent the truck driver and the trucking company. Most of my cases were in federal court, and many of them involved millions of dollars. And as I progressed in my career, that weight of responsibility just grew heavier. And it's a real paradox of success. The higher you climb, the heavier the burden. The higher you climb, the further you can fall. And you would think the more successful you are, the easier things become. But trust me, they often become harder. And for me, my drinking began to increase. It started as unwinding, but it became a loss of control where I had no power over my choice of drinking or not drinking. I broke promises to my family, but I broke promises to myself almost every night. And once at a family party, I had a blackout. I had an important conversation with my goddaughter that went on for quite some time. It was very important. It was very intimate and personal, and I could not remember a word of it the next day, and that scared me very much. And what I learned was that the success I was having professionally was really masking an internal crisis. And what's important to know is that our external achievements do not heal our internal wounds. We often think they will. We often think that winning the case, becoming partner, will take care of what we struggle with inside, but that's not the case. Those external achievements do not heal our internal wounds. After that blackout, I went to my first recovery meeting. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I found hope in the vulnerability and authenticity of the other members who I heard speak. It gave me permission to be imperfect and still worthy. And I started working with the Maryland Lawyers Assistance Program. And later I became chair of the committee in Baltimore County. And I worked a lot with lawyers who were struggling with alcoholism or clinical depression. And I saw the same struggles in attorney after attorney: perfectionism, people-pleasing, fear of failure, imposter syndrome. But I witnessed miracles of recovery and transformation. And my greatest satisfaction came from helping other lawyers. I learned from that experience that our real strength comes not from hiding, not from keeping things stuffed inside, but from acknowledging our struggles and getting the support that can help lift us. Later, I moved to Pinehurst, North Carolina with my wife, Brenda. It was the first time I really had space to breathe and reflect. And as I thought on our morning walks about my career, my life, and reflected on it, I realized my favorite moments were not my big wins, and I had some of them. I had some amazing victories in trial court, and they were very, very exhilarating. But my favorite moments were conversations with lawyers who were struggling and wanted to get better, with young attorneys who wanted to become the best attorney they could be, in ways I was helping and supporting other lawyers in their development. And after about 45 years, I decided to leave active practice. I went inactive with the Maryland Bar in early 2025. And I 100% dedicated my life to helping attorneys find the freedom, the fulfillment, and the joy that they truly deserve out of the practice of law. And I was motivated by the fact that the transformation and freedom that I experienced, each of you deserve as well. And I learned that our purpose in life often emerges from our deepest pain, not from our greatest success. I have a lot of conversations with lawyers today, many, as you all may know. And I've seen so many elite lawyers earning $300,000 or more, very successful lawyers who feel trapped by their success. They're working 80-hour weeks from compulsion more than from necessity. And their identity is tied to being the hardest working lawyer, the one who take all the calls from the clients at all hours, the ones who never say no, who just fight and grind on. And they should be very grateful for all their success, but they actually feel miserable. I hear often about the 3 a.m. anxiety they have, where they wake up worried about cases and client demands and about missing family moments repeatedly. One lawyer I coach is an equity partner in a big firm who's had panic attacks. And she told me how she's worked so hard to get here, but inside she feels like she's dying. And we work together to transform her through what I call internal authority, which is not judging our success by outside circumstances like a jury verdict, a ruling on a motion, a compliment from a judge, a client referring another client to us, a lawyer who's nice to us, not from those outside circumstances, because sometimes they don't go our way. Sometimes we lose the case. Sometimes we lose a client. Sometimes a lawyer is nasty and unprofessional. But instead, I showed her how to judge herself, how to evaluate where she is in her practice based on factors inside of her, her preparation, her commitment, her devotion, her empathy, her efforts, rather than the result, because the result we have no control over. And she started practicing from confidence rather than fear. And I've learned that often it's the most successful lawyers who inside are often struggling the most. How does change actually happen? How do we break free of that? With my clients, I create a safe place for honest communication. They can share anything with me and they know it stays between us. And they receive support and encouragement. And they also know that I often see in them traits and qualities that they don't give themselves enough credit for. It's not about generic work-life balance advice. It's targeted strategies for high-stakes demanding practices. Because when we operate from internal authority, when we operate from your own values and your own competence, you develop a freedom and confidence. See, freedom is working from choice, not from compulsion. One of my clients is a managing partner. He used to check emails until midnight. He'd wake at 4 a.m. worried about things related to his practice. And I worked with him to establish sacred boundaries. Boundaries during the day when he could get some focused work done. Boundaries at the end of the day so he could enjoy being home. What was his fear? That clients would fire him because he wasn't constantly available. What was the reality? His clients actually respected him much more. He learned to lead from rest instead of exhaustion. See, real boundaries actually improve client service. And in my work with lawyers, I have 3 fundamental pillars, which I'll mention only briefly, and in future episodes I'll talk about them more. But the first is internal authority, which I mentioned today, where your confidence comes from your competence, your commitment, your devotion, not from validation from other people or circumstances. We work on building sustainable excellence, where you can maintain peak performance without getting burned out. And professional freedom, a practice that serves your life and doesn't consume it. That courthouse bathroom moment that I started with in this episode, that moment of fear and anxiety before my first solo trial taught me something profound. Our greatest challenges often become our greatest gifts when we're willing to face them honestly. Every struggle I've shared with you today, the childhood bullying, the perfectionism, the addiction, the crushing professional pressure, they all have become part of what allows me to help other attorneys find freedom today. The pain had purpose, even when I couldn't see it. If you're recognizing yourself in the story, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, but most importantly, the success that feels hollow, that feels like it's ensnared you, I want you to know you are not alone. The challenges you're facing are real, but so are the solutions. See, you've invested too much building your career to let internal struggles undermine it. Your family deserves the best version of you. Your clients deserve an attorney practicing from strength, not from fear. And the legal profession needs leaders who model authentic success. Your journey toward professional freedom starts with a single decision: to stop struggling alone. There's no need to be alone, and to get the support you deserve. That bathroom mirror moment was the beginning of my transformation, and this moment could be the beginning of yours. If you are ready to explore what authentic freedom could look like in your practice, I'd like to offer you a complimentary coaching call. No obligation at all, just a conversation between 2 attorneys about what's possible. You can schedule that at GaryMiles.net, email me directly at Gary@GaryMiles.net, or sign up in the link in the show notes. So please remember this: practice law with purpose. Live life with freedom. Your best days as an attorney and as a human being are still ahead of you. I'm Gary Miles. Thanks for listening to The Free Lawyer. Until next time, lead from internal authority.